before we begin with our panel, before every White County Farm Bureau board meeting each month, we always recite the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you are a chapter officer, would you raise your hand? Okay. This young lady right here, would you come up here and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. So prior to today's luncheon, you were asked by your advisors to complete a Google form and submit questions for our panel. We had a total of 68 questions submitted, so thank you for those. Of those 68, we picked out around 20 questions from the list that we're going to try to focus on for today's discussion. Your questions were outstanding. Many original thoughts. There was a few that overlapped a little bit, but you guys did an excellent job with your questions. If you submitted a question that we used today, we would like to invite you to select a gift from our swag table that is back there underneath the clock. We have Illinois Farm Bureau branded portfolios, White County Farm Bureau branded portfolios, and hot off the press new White County Farm Bureau hats. So I do ask that you wait until your question is answered by the panelists before you go up to the gift table. We're also going to provide a little bit of time to take questions from the audience depending on how the discussion goes today. So on the table you'll see a page or a piece of paper where you can keep notes. So if you've got a question that pops in your head, write it down because it might be 15 minutes before we take the next question, and by then it might be gone. So write your questions down as you think of them, and we'll provide an opportunity for you guys to participate as well. We are recording today's program over there just because we want to get, again, the knowledge that these guys have. We want to try to capture that for future generations. And we'll be sharing that video on our YouTube channel, and we'll send the links to our FFA advisors as well. So, panel, before we start doing questions, I'd like each of you to go through and introduce yourselves. It's up to you who starts first.
I'm Rusty Walsh, farm in Hawthorne Township.
Can you use the microphone, please?
Can I use the microphone?
All right.
No, I can't. Push a button?
Nope, just talk.
Just talk. Okay. Rusty Walsh, live in Hawthorne Township, have farmed 60 years basically. I've got some college education, put in my time, but I didn't graduate. How's that? So it's, raised corn, wheat, beans, green beans over the years, different vegetable crops, livestock, cattle and hogs. So.
Okay, I'm David Brown. I've been farming since 1979. I have a degree in agricultural economics from the University of Illinois. Started farming immediately after graduation. Today I'm a corn soybean farmer, but I'm like Rusty. We had livestock, we raised vegetable crops, we irrigate quite a bit, which gave us that opportunity, but we're not doing that anymore. So here I am.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Doug Winter. I farm north of Carmi, just a little bit south of the metro area of Burnt Prairie. We live in the suburbs, but I'm a fifth generation farmer. I started farming, well, my great-great-grandfather started in 1869. We still have some of that original property that he purchased at that time. We grow yellow corn, white corn, soybeans, both seed and commercial beans for Pioneer and for Remington. Got my start in farming with my dad in '75. My wife is Nancy Winter, the CPA here in town, and that's about it in a nutshell. Glad to be here.
Hi, I'm Don Duval, and technically I'm a retired farmer. I no longer actually do the operational standpoint of it, but I still consider myself a farmer, but most of it now would be considered management. I manage my farm as well as a daughter's land and brothers, so more now just a management standpoint. When I did farm, it was a grain farm, farmed with family, brother and dad.
Okay, thank you. So, our first question today comes from Macy McCarthy from NCOE. Is Macy with us today? Oh, all right. So one of the questions that Macy submitted was, what are the biggest challenges farmers in this area face? Who wants to take that one first?
Well, it's always weather. I mean, it's just where it hinges. Good weather, bad weather, too much rain, not enough rain. And then next thing is, I guess would be breakdowns of equipment, but weather.
One thing I would add too is, markets. We do raise international commodities. So whatever happens in the farthest point away from us might have the most effect on what happens to us, and we're completely helpless as to how we react to a lot of that.
And I think too, it's no different in what our challenges is and what the rest of the country's challenges. And I think those basically, as they've talked about, are things that you can't control, things like the weather. So that's always a challenge.
I would probably add one of the biggest factors short term for farmers in our immediate future right now is input costs. Everybody's trying to figure out how are they going to get what they're going to plant, what's your crop mix going to be, how are you going to do that profitably. So, but in addition to, as Rusty said, weather is the biggest factor that we deal with on a day-to-day, year-to-year basis, the variability of that and the whims of the grain markets.
And Macy, you can go get your swag. Okay. All right. Our next question is from Jackson Lamp. Is Jackson with us? All right, good deal. So Jackson submitted a question that says, what skills are most important for a farmer to have?
All of them. That's about all I can say, because one thing about farming is it's great and it may be terrible at the same time. Whatever you think you're going to start out doing at the beginning of the day, and maybe you tell your wife when you leave, go to work, you say, well, I'm going to do blah, blah, blah today, and within an hour you haven't done one of the things that you said you were ever going to do, and you do completely different things just because that's what farming is.
Yeah, it's been said that farmers are jacks of all trades and masters of none, and I think that's very true. Just like they said, you're doing something different every day. But I think probably one skill that you definitely will need is a willingness to learn, because you're continually going to be doing different things in different ways. So that willingness to learn, I think, is important.
You're never bored. That doesn't come in the equation. You're never bored. Some days you need to be a mechanic. Some days you need to be a carpenter. And where it's lost me is this AI stuff. I'm kind of past that, so I'm kind of lost there.
As far as personality traits, two of the things that come to mind right off the bat are resiliency and patience. When you're dealing with as many variables in farming as what you do in this occupation or in this lifestyle, you have got to be able to adapt, and flexibility is another one. As they've all said, you're going to go out the door with a plan, and about 4 minutes after you walk out the door, the plan's up in smoke because your cell phone's rang 3 times and everything has changed. But I think I keep going back to resiliency, because you've got to go through a lot of adverse weather conditions. You've got to go through adverse market conditions, and you've still got to be able to keep your optimism about the job that you're going to do and about your growing season.
One thing I'd also say is that, and I think the older I get, the more I realize this: no two farmers farm alike, legitimately. I mean, What I'm strong at doing on my farm, and what Rusty and the rest of the people up here, what all of us, we think we're strong at doing, the other one may not be. And you look around and you say, well, he farms different than I do. But the thing is, I'm always stunned at the end of the day is we all seem to make money. We all seem to do good if you can find your forte of what you're good at and push that.
Good. Jackson. Yep, so, all right. Our next question comes from Max Cheek. All right. So Max says, I haven't quite decided what I want to do with my life and was wanting to know how each of you had gotten into farming, the farming industry, back in your day.
Max, I haven't decided yet either, so.
What I want to know, Max, is what's this back in the day crap? I was very fortunate. Like I said, I'm a fifth generation farmer. When I started in college, I was a pre-med major. My mom did not want me to come back to the farm, and I was going to become a doctor. Well, it took about 2 years of college for me to realize that I really loved farming. I just had to get away from it to find out. But I had my start through the blessings of my father and what my grandfather and great-great-grandfathers had built up before then in our operation. But I had, I guess, for all practical purposes, an easy way in because I had family members and kind of a farming heritage to step into, and it made my beginnings a lot easier.
I think we all did. We all, previous generations started the farm, so it was an easy transition into it.
And when it comes to farming, almost the only transition into it to some extent, unfortunately. The capital requirement is such that you've almost got to inherit something and you're not going to do it.
Is this going to pick us up on the recording if we don't?
Maybe not. Yeah, let's use a mic. So.
Now, the one thing I will say, I think if somebody really wants to farm, per se, as an actual farmer, and you don't have that advantage, I legitimately believe that to some extent the way agriculture is changing, and from a production agriculture stand, that I think there are places for people that want to farm if you can get hooked up with somebody who's retiring or somebody that doesn't have anybody in the family that wants to do it at that time. But you're going to have to hunt that out, I think. I would say that those conditions exist.
Yeah, I started out farming with my dad and then rented a farm in Mississippi and farmed in Mississippi for 3 crops. Moved back to Illinois to manage a hog operation and managed it for 7 years and then moved back to the home farm. But Dad got a lot smarter while I was gone, so if you know what I mean.
I guess I'd also point out that, and I thought of this because I just read yesterday that there are about 200,000 jobs in Illinois that are ag-related. Of those, only about 27,000 are actually production agriculture. So there's avenues to be in ag here in Illinois that don't involve driving a tractor.
Okay, Max, go get your. So this, I'm going to skip around a little bit in our list, but this kind of transitions into the next question that comes from Jalen Phillips. Jalen here? That's you, okay. She said, what inspired you to start farming, which I think that kind of, we covered that, but I want you to focus on the second part, which was, what keeps you motivated through the difficult seasons? Which we've had a few of those these last few years. Why do you keep doing what you do?
The bank tells you to go to work. No, I think motivation, I think you got to be motivated to be a farmer to start with, and you got to be able to get out of bed without somebody coaxing you and go to work. So, I think self-motivation, you have to have that.
Yeah, I think Rusty's exactly right. There's a lot of rewards in farming that you don't really see on the surface. There's a lot of gratification in being able to watch crops you're planting grow. going to harvest and being able to see you've done a good job and see what's rolling in the combine hopper, what's going in the grain bins. But I think, and self-motivation is one of the key things. And being able to get up every morning and to have a plan before you go to bed, or have a plan by the time you go out the back door, and kind of have a schedule, some idea of what you're going to do, what you're going to need to do, what you're going to send if you've got employees, what you're going to have your employees do.
Yeah, and I think the motivation thing in any occupation, and you've all learned this already, anything you want to do and you want to be good at it, you have to be motivated, you have to be a self-starter, and if you are those things, more than likely you're going to be successful doing it. Now, the one thing I'll say about motivation is I age, I have less of it. I just seem like you just get wore out. And that's the one thing, you don't see that one coming as you age. It's like you think you're going to have all the energy every day and motivated, and then it's like, well, you start hitting 70 and you're going, I don't know, But you guys are still young, so you got it.
Okay, Jalen. Okay, Rusty brought up AI just a little bit ago, and I don't know that that's necessarily going to be the answer to this question, but it's kind of along those lines. What new technologies have had the biggest impact on your farm? And this question came from Caitlin Garner from Carmi. There's Caitlin. New technologies.
Guidance.
Expand on that, Rusty.
The fact that you can eat a sandwich from one end to the other to the field without steering wheel, and so in the dark of the night you can keep rows straight. It's just the guidance system. I think if I had to pick one thing, that may be in an air-conditioned cab.
Cab tractors are a big asset.
Big asset. But cabs without air conditioner work too good. So anyway, guidance is the number one reason, I think.
I look at a lot of things we've been able and guidance is one of these. What we've been able to do with global positioning satellites, being able to tell where we're at in the field, yield maps in a combine, being able to tell exactly what that field is making in individual spots in that field. One of the other things I think has been a big factor. We can use that same guidance to be able to grid sample on 2.5 acre grids in the field, and they've developed the technology to be able to spread fertilizers. Your potash and phosphate in particular can go according to those grid tests and what that's calling for on that 2.5 acre grid. So you can put exactly what that crop's going to need in that spot and change that going across the field. I think the drone technology, I think we're on just the very tip of what drone technology will do as far as applications of different pesticides and things like that. I find that one of the big exciting things coming up is I think we'll see that used more and more in a different crop scouting. We've been using that for a couple of years with crop scouting, and it's got our crop scouting time down by 90% because you can go through, film a lot of those fields, go back in the office and take a look at it on a bigger screen on your laptop and see if you've got a problem coming out in that field and find out, where we need to treat and exactly what we need to treat. One last thing I'll mention, and I don't know, there's about 4 different brands of it out. There's a technology out now by John Deere, is the only one that I know of, and let me qualify that. We use all red equipment, so this is not a plug for the green guys. The see and spray technology, I think, it absolutely amazes me that where that sprayer can go through the field and tell the difference between a soybean and a weed or a corn plant and a weed, and be able to turn on and turn off that application where it needs to be to do spot applications exactly. I think that's going to be really neat to be able to watch coming up in the future.
Yeah, and I think that Doug actually answered the question. I think it is AI, and it's the application of AI that you will see change agriculture. What Doug just mentioned already exists. There's AI can interpret not only whether it's a weed, but what type of weed, and then zap it with a laser. And so, number one, you're more efficient, you're using less chemicals, and you're treating specific weeds. So AI, I think it will be what will change agriculture?
Your imagination is going to be the only limiting factor in agriculture in the future. Because when I look back from when I look back from where I started into farming, I couldn't imagine a lot of the technology that we use on a day-to-day basis now that is just kind of standard hat. So yeah, what you think about way out in the future could well see come true within the next 10 years and probably within the next 20 years. It's so it's kind of like in the dare to dream thing. It's like, think about it, think about what a practical application would be and go for it.
I agree with what everybody said. I'll go back to the yield mapping. One thing that just to kind of give you guys a kind of a feel on yield mapping is, you know, things that you think you know in your head, that this side of the field doesn't yield there very good, this sand ridge over here doesn't do very well, but this flat area does very well, until we have a real wet year. But in a dry year it does good. You know these things. But yield mapping allows you to quantify those things on a piece of paper or a screen that you can look at. And then, so it's driven a lot of tiling. It drives a lot of the way how we fertilize, because for the first time you can actually quantify that in something that for the last 200 years was just in somebody's head. You know, you knew it, but you had a hard time telling your landlord what they should do on that, or, you know, so if you went to a landlord and said, oh, I think we need to tile or we need to do this, they'd go, yeah, I don't know, because that guy is never out there on that field. So, and going back to that dream and whatever, my son's in the tech world, and he told my wife one time, they were talking about something, I didn't hear this personally, but my son said, well, what do you know, my wife said, well, Alex, what kind of job do you want? And he said, I want a job that hadn't been invented yet. and I thought, when it kind of blew my wife away, and it kind of blew me away when he said that, but I think that's what you guys can do.
And that kind of brings us to, Caitlin, go ahead and get your, that brings us to our next question from Finley Height. Is Finley here? All right, there's Finley. She said, what is one piece of technology that you wish existed that would help the agricultural industry? Something you wish you had that you don't have now.
Wow. On a lot of days, robot employees.
Well, I think if you talk to us at our age, I almost think they've all been invented. You know, I mean, you know, all sorts of things that yeah, the fact that I get aggravated when your GPS goes out and you have to steer. I'm like, what? 20 years ago I steered every day and never thought anything was wrong with that. Now when I have to move my arm like this, I think things have gone terrible, you know. But I mean, that's a good question, but I don't know what it is yet because it's not out there.
I'll go back to that. I think AI is the application of AI, and we don't know what that could be. I mean, literally, it could be anything. It could be something else doing the work that we as farmers do now. It could be a robotic. It could be things like that literally may invent yourself out of a job.
Okay, Finley, we'll get your gift. Again, we're kind of following along this theme here of technology and generations. This is a question that came from Brody Warren. Brody here? All right, Brody. Brody says, what's the biggest difference in the way you farm today compared to the way your parents and grandparents farmed? I think we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but, you know.
Well, we've parked a moldboard plow. In fact, we hauled it up for salvage. So we don't work ground like I can remember as a youth. I'd tell my dad, I said, well, I've got that field disc. He said, well, disc it again. You're not doing anything. So, and we quit that kind of cultivating. So now we're pretty well 100% no-till on beans, and minimum tillage on corn for the most part. So less tillage.
I think one big difference in grandparents versus today is that back then they did everything from start to finish, whereas now we sub that out to other entities, largely because things become so expensive, like variable technology on application of fertilizer. That piece of equipment may cost anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000, so it becomes infeasible for every farmer to have one of those pieces of equipment. So the service industry has become a lot more efficient in that way. So I think now, rather than us applying all of our fertilizer, which they used to do, you farm that out to an organization. So I think it's become more a management aspect of farming as opposed to an actual operational part of it.
One thing I'll say, I think my father and grandfather and generations before that would have always said, or always thought, if I come home every day dirty and tired, I did well that day. That is no longer true. You can come home dirty and tired every day, but if you don't make the right decisions during that day, and a lot of those right decisions and what you need to be spending your time is sitting behind a desk, looking at a computer, making marketing decisions, making management decisions, and that getting out there and being dirty and tired has kind of gone the way of my dad and my grandma.
I'm gonna let it go with them, they've covered it very well.
Okay. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit for this question. Comes from Owen Russell. Is Owen here? Yep, all right. Owen asked, is it or how important in this day and age is it to have some type of college degree in agriculture to run or to work on the farm?
Well, I'll say it's not that important. I think it helps drastically. I think, a college degree of some sort, whether it's an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, it does open you up. I look back on my own life, things that I learned while I was in college about agriculture, I didn't know existed. They were things that you didn't know just because you grew up on a farm, but then you realize that the world's a big place, and I think it's not necessary, but I think it actually opens up your eyes often.
For one thing, I think you put your time in, and I didn't get my degree. I spent the time, and then it was time for me to go to work. At that point, I was married and had a family on the way. So, but my degree, my studies were mainly econ and animal science, and so I'm using I think the world's past what I learned in ag econ years ago, and in the science I've got a bunch of cats. That's the only livestock I've got. So no, I don't think it's necessary, but you need to put your time in.
I would agree with both what they said, and I do have a degree. I've got a bachelor's in plant and soil science with a minor, or I've got a bachelor's in agricultural economics with a minor in plant and soil science from SIU at Carbondale, the other university in Illinois.
The main one.
I think one of my college professors, this has stuck in my mind for years and years. One of my college professors said you spend your time going to college and us teaching you all of the answers, and then you spend the rest of your life hoping people ask you the right questions. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. You can learn the basics, whether it's necessary. I think maybe something in an associate's degree would be very useful as an introduction. The things you're going to learn once you get in a farming operation and functioning in a farming operation, the School of Hard Knocks will teach you probably 80 or 90% of what your useful information is going to be. One of the reasons is because the way things change so fast, whether it's markets, whether it's weather conditions, the inputs that you're using, it's just it's a constant learning curve and kind of a constant improvement curve in your farming operation, and it's stuff that you kind of have to learn out there. A degree is a useful beginning, but in no way think that college degree is going to prepare you for what you're going to need to know in the next 25 years of your life.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I'd also say that you don't have to have a degree in agriculture. I think the benefit of a college degree or advanced education is not in what you learn, because as we talked about, the technology is changing so fast in agriculture that what they're teaching is probably not what you're going to be doing. So it's not what you'll learn, it's learning how to learn. And you'll continue doing that whether it's in an institution or not.
I thought Doug was going to say this actually, so I'm going to say what you inspired me to say. An education is the beginning, but it's no ways the end of what you'll do. You know, because that's just the beginning of you wanting to learn and wanting to know what you want to do. And one thing I'll say, and whether it's a little off base on this question, but I think Donnie mentioned there were 200,000. What'd you say, Judge?
200,000 jobs in Illinois.
In agriculture. The one thing I think that's great about agriculture is the range of jobs that are out there. I mean, if you want to get dirty and you know, get greasy every day, then you need to be a machinery tech. If you don't ever want to get dirty, you need to be a chemical rep. You know, and those jobs exist.
Or you got to worry about mud on your shoes.
Yeah. Or you can be anything in between. There's just, I mean, you've got grain marketers, you know, guys that never leave their computer screen all day long. You know, you can actually work on a farm. I mean, I don't know what other industry has such a range of things that you can do, and they're all different, and you just need to figure out what you want to do with your life and pursue those. Some need no education, some need an associate degree, some need a bachelor's degree.
Okay, what is the most, I'm sorry, the student that asked that last one, you can go get your prize. Sorry if I missed anybody. Okay. What is the most important lesson you learned from the generation before you, and how has it shaped the way you farm today? That question comes from Connor Graves.
Well, when I started out farming, I think I was probably a control freak. And in agriculture, there are a lot of things that you cannot control. It's completely out of your control. And I remember being frustrated with my dad, and you know, when things weren't fitting the plan that I thought they were supposed to, and I was kind of thought, how can you be so nonchalant about this? I mean, you need to be worried. And so I realized that he had learned that you can't control everything, and you have to learn to go with the flow source. So what I learned from that generation was a realization that you can't control everything.
I think one of the greatest things I learned from the generation before me, particularly my dad and my brother's about 11 years older than I am, from both of them was a work ethic. I think learning that you have got to go out there every day and you've got to accomplish your jobs to the best of your ability. You have got to do your best job of analyzing what is coming at you, and to go at it very hard every day, because if you don't, somebody's not going to come behind you and sweep up. You're going to have it to do tomorrow, and you're just going to get farther and farther behind. So I think that being able to go at it and put your heart and your muscles into it is one of the biggest things that I've learned from them. And then very well what Don just said, the patience to realize, or the knowledge to realize that you can't control everything out there. You can't control a lot of the things that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And you have to come to realize, you know, to have the best effect on the things that you can control, and kind of leave all the rest of them up to God and Mother Nature and the other influences that are out there.
The one thing I'll say, you know, working in my early days in a multi-generational farm, was it's a blessing and a curse at the same time. And I say that from several, you know, it's a blessing to work with your family. It's a blessing to work with somebody that has done exactly what you're doing. At times it's a curse because it's hard to get along with family, often. I always kind of said, I never figured out, things never move very fast in a multi-generational situation, because you're the young guy, you're the young whippersnapper that wants to do this and that, and you suggest that to your dad, and they, oh, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Well, and there's a lot to that, because he's probably got a reason why he thinks it's a stupid thing, and you know, so the older generation kind of keeps you in check, and so things never move as fast as you might think they should. But it's kind of like there's a reason for some of that.
I think you got a little set.
I will add to that a personal experience. Sometimes they don't keep you in check, and sometimes they say, learn your lesson. And I can point to some things where my dad said, no, this is probably, but no, I'm going to call the shots, and step back and let me, and I found out why, very wrong. So sometimes they do let you learn from experience. It is the best teacher.
I'll think of an example that a father, one of my father's friends used to say anytime he screwed something up. Well, my grandfather used to say this. He said, when you do something that didn't work out very good, he said, you know, somebody'd say, well, you didn't learn anything. And my grandfather had said, yeah, I learned never to do that again. And then a friend of my father's used to say anytime they'd screw up something like herbicide or something like that, he'd always call it a test plot.
To go back to kind of what David and Donnie have both said, yeah, around our operation, my brother and I began to identify that as the crash and burn theory. Dad'd give you enough rope to realize that you were stupid. But something Rusty said earlier, and I think that it's something that I learned on one of the prior questions, was talking about after he came back from Mississippi and his dad had got a lot smarter. My dad and I were at odds for the first 10 years that we farmed together. I was pretty progressive and he was pretty conventional. As I've gotten older, in the years after my dad retired, after he passed away, my father gets smarter every day that I'm alive. There are things that I can remember him saying and things that we were doing, and I just couldn't see the logic in it. And now all of a sudden everybody talks about the aha moment. Well, about every day of my life I have an aha moment. It's like, oh, that's what Norman was talking about.
Okay, this question comes from Max. I think we've had one of his before, maybe. How do farmers determine what crop and how many acres to plant, and how to know how much yield is needed to break even at the end of the year?
Numbers. I mean, you've just got to look at numbers all the time. And if you don't want to look at numbers, you're not going to be farming very long. Now, they may not always have to be your numbers, but they have to be somebody's numbers that you trust. And when I say that, you need to know what your cost of production is, and then to determine what you're going to raise. And like right now, we're looking at a situation where soybeans are more profitable than corn is, kind of sadly, because that's in a bad market. Normally soybeans are your profitable situation because the cost of production is lower. But yeah, numbers.
Yeah, David's exactly right. I don't know how many times, probably at least a half a dozen this year, I've already reanalyzed my cropping pattern, and that's all changed within the last 7 days with what fertilizer prices have done, what fuel prices have done. It's something, it's a constant change environment, and you have got to be on top of it. I use Excel spreadsheets, and finally learned how to write. After a number of years ago, I learned how to write the formulas into them, because I found out that if you change the numbers up here, it changes all the numbers below that, and that's an integral part of your farming operation. You've got to do a constant analysis of what's coming up, where your profitability is. And just be willing to make that change. It goes back to the flexibility we were talking about earlier.
I've asked this question, just interesting that this come up. I asked this question to 2 lenders in the last couple of weeks. I said, how many farmers do you know that realize they're broke before you, as a lender, tells them they are? And they said very few. So that shows you that not enough farmers are looking at the numbers themselves. They're just allowing a banker to tell them that they're not doing well.
And by the time the banker tells you that, it's not a pretty situation, trust me.
We've got a few questions from Paxton. Is Paxton here? All right. And 2 of them, and they kind of go along the same line. The first one, what is the average cost of the products you use? So average price for a bag of seed corn, fuel, fertilizer.
Too high.
I can give you a few of those. Average cost of seed corn comes to mind just right off the bat, because that's been one of my hot points for about the last 4 or 5 months. List price, we'll start out at list price. A lot of the seeds are running between $385 and $400 a unit, which is, a unit is 80,000 kernels. They don't package them in bushel bags anymore. Everything is predominantly packaged in corn in 80,000 units. After discounts, depending on your size and the volume that you're buying, but you can get that down to someplace around 325. You do the math, that bag of corn will plant 2.5 acres. So you're looking at a little over $100 an acre for your seed. Anhydrous, I go back to what David said, too high.
Well, it's gonna cost $1,000 to put out a corn crop. $1,000 an acre.
Yeah, you can try, if you lump everything together, you might as well knock off, someplace between $950 and $1,000 an acre to put that corn crop in the ground. Soybeans are somewhat less than that, but if you're doing your fertility follow-up with soybeans, you're still gonna have probably $750 an acre tied up in an acre of soybeans with seed and nutrients and everything with your herbicide program and harvesting equipment costs.
And right now, that's about our return too. The same price I gave you for cost is about what the return is.
I'm not sure we're cheering y'all on to want to follow in this occupation, but
You might want to be in that other 200, not in that 26 production agriculture.
And by the way, I forgot to mention that ag lending is another occupation. Yeah.
Big time.
Well, since you brought it up, and this is a question for me. It's not one of the students, but I think there was some along this theme. How do you get from the lean years through the good years and back to the lean years? How do you manage the web or the flow, the ups and the downs of farming and agriculture?
You always remember to pay yourself in the good years and put some back. So you gotta remember.
Put money into savings is what you're saying.
You gotta put some back somewhere. And probably not, you don't want, it's not a bad idea if you've got low fertility to put that extra money back into fertility of your soil, but most of us have already done that. But so you need something off the farm away, kind of hid away. And so, yeah, pay yourself.
I agree.
And from a practical application, what Rusty had said about putting it back in the soil, in some of those lean years, maybe you can, make a withdrawal from that soil bank and say, okay, this year we can forego on the fertilizer and take advantage of that.
And also remember, you don't have to have the shiniest, the newest, the latest. Don't make financial decisions that are not good ones. I know everybody wants a new tractor, a new combine, a new truck. Shiny's nice, but you don't always have to have it.
Well, and that was my follow-up question, also from Paxton. Is it justifiable to purchase brand-new equipment, or should you stick with used equipment?
I farmed a little over 60 years, never owned a new combine. I found out that people better off than me were leasing combines and turning them in after 3 years, and to me, they were like new combines. I think I've bought 3 new tractors, and at some point, I started buying what was good used equipment all along. So, no, you don't have to have new equipment. It's nice, but just whack what you got and make it look new.
I'm like Rusty. In 50 years of farming, a little over, I have bought 2 new tractors in that time. Everything else has been on a used basis. I bought the first new combine header that I've ever bought in my life just last year. We've always ran used equipment and been able to work on it, and the repair bills were less than what the cost of owning new was. A can of wax, if you want a nice shiny piece of equipment, a can of wax is one heck of a lot cheaper than a $450,000 tractor is. So it takes a little elbow grease, but it still looks just as good. And the guys gripe about the reflection off the hood in their eyes in the sun anyway, so.
Okay. And go get your prize off the table there. Okay, this question comes from Macy McCarthy. How do tariffs affect farmers?
As a general rule, it depends on what side of the fence you're looking at, but tariffs, I got several years with United Soybean Board and the Illinois Soybean Association and U.S. Export Council, U.S. Soybean Export Council. And I am a free trade kind of guy. I see tariffs as giving us a level playing field because of what a lot of other countries do to our products coming, what products we're exporting coming into their countries. But I also see that on the inbound side that it can have a lot of adverse effect on the inputs that we're buying, because just like David said a while ago, we produce a lot of international product. We export nearly 60% of the soybeans that we grow and about 30 some odd percent of the corn that we produce in this country. And tariffs have always been used on the other end to level the playing field in those countries are going into, just to kind of protect their own agriculture. The European Union is probably one of the most guilty of that over the years, if you study history of trade. I don't see it as a real good product coming in because we kind of end up paying the tariffs in the end, because we like I said, we produce a high volume of exportable crop. By the same token, nearly all of our nitrogen and potash and phosphates that we use for crop nutrients, and then a lot of the steel that's used to go into those big new shiny tractors we were talking about a minute ago is imported from China. And so I see it as a two-edged sword, but I'm not a big fan of tariffs. I think it has kind of an adverse effect. In the end, I think the adverse effect outweighs what the positives are for us in agriculture.
And the reason it hits agriculture so hard is because really about the only thing that we in America export are grain commodities. So, we don't make a lot of other stuff that's exported. So, and it is a retaliation thing. Tariffs are a retaliation thing on trade. So if they say, well, we're going to not buy your product, that's probably going to be grains. So that's why it hits the farmer most adversely.
Anytime, like I said, anytime, we're international actions affect us every day. Good example with the war with Iran right now. Oil has gone up $30 a barrel. $30 a barrel, and we get we don't need any oil from Iran. We don't need any, because we're self-sufficient with oil right now. I'm kind of changing what I'm talking about a little bit, but because oil is an internationally traded commodity, oil in this country has gone up 30 bucks a barrel. Now, we live in the Illinois oil basin. That's a good thing to a lot of people. But to people that buy diesel and gasoline, it's not a good thing. So anytime you affect anything on an international scale, it affects us whether, quote, it really does or not.
Okay, I've got several questions here, I think that are good from Austin, is it Quartermoose? Sorry if I butchered that, buddy. Okay. What do you think about no-till and tillage, and how do you know when to do and what type of tillage to do on each field?
I think you just look around, we do very little tillage anymore. I think with the equipment we've got, with the chemicals we've got, with the seed we've got, we can no-till fine and get good yields. It hurts us in certain situations, but when you till ground, it costs a lot of money also, and then there can be some adverse effects by erosion or whatever. But it kind of goes back, it's just like kind of cover crops today. I'm not necessarily a big fan of cover crops because I see there are certain aspects that can be detrimental at some point, because I like to get out in the spring and plant fast and early, and I can't there. It kind of goes back to that same thing. You can look around at farmers and everybody, some guys that no-till, and there's, I'll use two farmers that I see often. One guy works up, it's kind of like Rusty said, if Dad sent you out to disc something, you got done, you'd say, well, go disc it again. Why? Well, just cause you're sitting in the shop doing nothing. But I can see farmers that till and till up all the time. And then I see guys right beside them that plant cover crops, no-till, do all that. And at the end of the day, I don't see that either one of them do much financially or much different.
I think part of the reason too, here in southern Illinois, the topography here lends itself to no-till, and this area was actually in the 70s was one of the first areas to widely adopt no-till, but it's largely because of the sloping and the type of farmland topography there is here, compared to like central Illinois where everything's kind of flattened back. You don't have to worry about silt erosion and water erosion, maybe wind erosion, but this area was an early adopter of no-till for that reason.
And on my particular operation, we're about 60% no-till. In the middle of my farm operation, we have about roughly about 1,400 acres in rolling hill ground. That's the only way to keep the soil and the nutrients that you're placing out there in place, is to come in and use a no-till, several years of no-till just to keep everything in place. We've got some bottom ground that we have found does not respond very well. It's Little Wabash River bottom ground, does not respond really well to full no-till. We use what is referred to as a mulch till system on that, where we will come in and not do anything in the fall, but we'll come in the spring and hit it one time with some sort of what's called a vertical tillage tool, which is a very minimal amount of soil disturbance. What we aim for is leaving at least 40% of that crop residue on the surface to avoid erosion, but it helps with the insoak. We've found that it helps also with emergence, with crop emergence. But it's one of those things, you have to look at your soil type, you have to look at what your soil, what your loss is going to be. You have to look at the economics compared to, even if you give up a few bushels of yield, how that is going to tie out with the money you're saving by not, with the diesel fuel and the equipment costs, and not having to put that piece of equipment over the top of that ground to do any sort of tillage work or anything like that. So it's kind of it goes back to a lot of the other things you do in farming. You kind of got to look at it on a field by field analysis to see what's going to be the optimum, what's going to make the optimum profit on this field, and yet be environmentally and conservation wise responsible with what you're doing on your farming operation.
I think Doug's pretty well covered it. Well, I will say one thing, the first no-till planter was invented at Ewing, or not Ewing, at University of Illinois,
Dixon Springs.
Dixon Springs.
Dixon Springs. They were the first ones to come up with a no-till planter, so, and that was in the late sixties or early sixties.
Yeah.
So,
A comment I'll make, and it's really easy. Let's just say you have a really nice fall. You're done harvesting, it's dry, and for all of us sitting here, it's really hard not to go think you ought to be tilling something up, just because that's kind of what we think we should be doing. Should be doing something. But a comment I always make is till with a purpose. Don't till unless you think that there's an advantage to doing it. Let's just say you've rutted up a field. Yeah, you better till it and smooth it back down. Let's just say you think you've got a field that's compacted. Break up the hard pan that you've maybe created yourself. Or if you want to get out earlier in the spring, you can till up something to leave it a little bare so that you can get something done. But till with a purpose.
And that leads into Austin's next question. How do you manage soil health, and what type of minerals to put down, and how do those minerals help the crops?
As far as nutrients, one of the first places that I go to is soil test. You've got to analyze that soil test and see what that soil needs, what's missing in that field. Is it low in potash? We got into a situation last year, and I had the guy that does my analysis, does the soil, pulls the soil test and sends the testing off to a lab that brings it back, and he does the analysis. And one of the things we found out was that we didn't need to put potash down on about 85% of the acres. Or no, I'm sorry, not potash. We didn't need to put phosphate down on about 85% of the acres of farm last year. We needed to make an application, nitrogen if it was corn, and potash for nearly everything for both corn and beans. But we found out that our build-out program, we actually had excess potash out there. So I think you've got to look, that's one of the challenges of farming, and the bigger your operation gets, the more intense that analysis has got to be to still be able to do things on a field-by-field basis and know what you need where, rather than using a shotgun approach to everything and doing the same thing all over. So it's part of a learning experience and part of an analysis experience all at the same time.
And one thing I'll mention is lime. That's something that doesn't get pushed by fertilizer dealerships because nobody seems to make any money applying lime. But I'll always say, keep your pH good, and all your fertility then is more readily available. So if you have $1 to put on an acre, put it in lime.
I'll reiterate what David said on liming. The University of Illinois Department of Ag, or Department of ACES now, has done a lot of research over the years. And Emerson Knopfliger, one of who I regard as one of their best professors up there in these areas, and he did a ranking several years ago, and of what you should pay attention to on your farm first. And his ranking, I don't remember all of it, but his number one was drainage, number two was liming or soil pH adjustment, number three was your nutrients, and et cetera on the other inputs that you're putting in. But lime is such a contingent factor in your soils, because if you don't keep that pH adjusted within the best growing range for your crops that you're going to grow, the rest of your stuff that you're doing is really not going to work that well, because you can lock up those nutrients. If you don't have that pH adjusted, you can end up not have phosphate availability, or you can end up not having potash availability, and a number of factors that go into that. And sorry, the plant and soil science degree creeps out every once in a while.
Well, herbicides will work better.
Oh, yeah, it can have an adverse effect on herbicides as much as anything. There's a lot of things that are affected by that.
We had several students ask a similar question, so nobody's going to get credit for this one, but what is your opinion of commercial solar, and do you feel like our solar fields are taking over our farm fields?
Here we go again. I feel that alternative energy is probably a necessary tool in the toolbox. I think we're fools if we think that we're gonna take productive farm ground, and I don't mean top end producing, but take farm ground out of production to build solar panels on for the energy. I don't think this will hit home until, in your case, your mom and dads walk into Walmart one day and there's 80 people standing there and there's 17 loaves of bread on the shelf. I don't think people realize how much food we produce in this country, not only for ourselves to maintain a fairly cheap food policy in the big scheme of things, but to the point that we feed a lot of the world with our exports, because there's a lot of hunger around the world. If you get out there, it's a big problem, and it's a lot more massive problem around the world per capita than what it is in the United States. I haven't figured out why there's not laws that say if you're going to build a warehouse with so many square feet of flat space, it is mandatory that you put solar panels on top of that flat space on that warehouse, on the top of skyscrapers, over parking lots. There's a lot of area out there that I think is a lot wiser use of solar. Now, I say this from the standpoint of a guy that lost 80 acres that I was farming to a solar operation. We're pretty much surrounded in my part of Burnt Prairie Township with a 1,600 acre solar operation. And nearly every acre of that solar installation has been taking out of farm ground that was being cropped up until the time that they began construction. So, like I said, I think it's a necessary tool in the toolbox. And I think solar has its place on wind. I haven't quite figured out where wind's at yet or not. But as far as solar, I think there's some better places to put it rather than taking farm ground out of production.
And Doug, like he said, he's in the middle of it. I'm not. I'm kind of a sightseer. I do farm some near his area, so I'm near where that is. The thing is, I can't quite figure out is, and I agree with that, if you're going to build a new Costco or you're going to build something, put them on, require them to be put on the roof. Nobody will even see that they're there. Another one that I don't quite, I think, and these are hard things, how we land use, how we manage land use is a big one. So here, not so much in White County, but if you go to Hamilton County, there's quite a bit of CRP ground. I'm like, why can't they work something out if that ground's going to be sitting there and somebody just has to mow it every year? Why not work a deal out and say, okay, put your solar on that CRP ground? I think there's a lot better ways that we can manage it, but it would take a lot of work. And honestly, sometimes we don't like to put in the necessary work that we have to do.
Yeah, I think there's an individual rights aspect here. And as most of us in agriculture are big on individual rights. I ought to be able to say I can do whatever I want to with my farm, with my ground, and if I want to sell it to rent it to a solar company, I should have the right to do that. But I also think there's the aspect that solar ought to be able to pay for itself. If it has to be subsidized, then you're doing something wrong.
Ultimately, economics will win out. Now, what Donnie's saying, as long as it's subsidized, the economics often fall in that direction. But of the land, let's just say, if you owned 80 acres and somebody comes and tells you what they're going to lease that for to put solar, and you live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and you haven't seen the farm in 2 years, and you don't really care, you just want to see a paycheck, or you just want to see a check out of that ground, you're more than likely going to opt for solar. Now, if you're, you live next door to it, or you farm it and you want to keep farming, or you've got children that want to farm. The interesting thing about solar is it affects things so differently. I made this kind of joke. It's like, okay, if you're 65 or 70 years old and you want to retire, and somebody comes and says they want to rent your land for solar, you're gonna think that money just fell from heaven. It's like, okay, I've got an out here. I can just rent my farm for solar and live on that the rest of your life. If you're that same age and you've got 3 boys and girls that want a farm, then you're gonna be cussing it. You're gonna be cussing all the solar going around you because your offspring is wanting that land to farm. So even I've actually questioned this at times. Farm Bureau is in a tough situation to make any kind of cohesive stand on solar because they have to respect that 65-year-old farmer that wants to retire and live off that, and they have to respect the 65-year-old farmer whose kids want to farm. So how can they make a policy statement around solar? It looks difficult to me because it affects everybody different. If you moved out to the country and wanted to see countryside and all of a sudden solar pops up all around you, you're mad. You know, I mean, I understand all of those situations.
So we've got about 10 minutes left. I do want to take a few questions. If somebody has not had one of their questions selected and has one they would like to ask our panelists, now would be the time. Raise your hand. Go ahead.
So in farming, there's obviously a lot of years that you lose more than what you bring in for money. How do you look at that and then still stay motivated to keep farming those future years?
It's been said a lot of times that farming is not an occupation, it's a lifestyle. And I think it's something that you find once you get into it, you've got to have a dedication to it. Figuring the economics and like you said, that you'll have years when you make good money, you'll have years when you pretty much lose your socks. You have to develop a discipline to do exactly what Rusty said a while ago. You've got to keep back part of that money in the good years so that you can carry yourself on across those bad years. But I think that's part of what you're making as management or as a manager of the farm. You've got to have a business plan and realize that you're not going to be sitting there with the standard 9 to 5 wage income where somebody's going to write you a check every 2 weeks and hand you a paycheck. This is something where you've kind of got to discipline yourself to make your finances fly year to year and over a multitude of years, over 5 years or 10 years. It's just something you kind of learn to adapt to when you're in agriculture and in the farming business to be able to, I think, do an adequate job or do a responsible job of staying in the business.
I think a farmer, and I think all farmers pretty much are, you've got to be the eternal optimist. You just have to think that whatever I do, it's all going to turn out good in the end. And I've got a thing in my office that says, faith, planting a seed in the ground. And I think that kind of sums it up. You've got faith, so what are you going to do? I've got faith that I'm going to make some money, I'm going to plant that seed in the ground.
And I was just going to say, that's why you see a lot of farmers that come into it through a family farm, because they have years of this built up. You know, we've been putting a little aside. That's why it's so hard to start brand new, because sometimes it may be 3 or 4 years before you have that bumper crop or that financially bumper crop. So that's why it's tough to do that, and that's why you see so many heritage farms, family farms that have been around, because they have that.
It's so hard to come up with that first million to start with.
Well, what happens is in the tough time, let's just say you inherited some ground or you've got some land that's paid off already. You don't need, and yes, you think you're gonna make X dollars on those acres that you've already got paid off. Well, what happens is in those tough years, the profit that you made off of the ground that doesn't have quite the cost involved because the land is paid off or even the machinery's paid off, you can take that money and enable you to subsidize the acres that you owe money on, or the acres or the combine that you owe money on. So you've always got to have something like that going on.
I don't even remember the disease we had in 1970 that killed most of the blight.
Yeah,
My first year to farm by myself, I think my corn averaged 7 bushel to the acre, had some kind of southern leaf blight. And so with no crop and
And crop insurance wasn't good.
there was no crop insurance then. So I started driving truck nights. so you got to make a living. So I drive a truck nights and take care of the hogs in the daytime, and something that you persevere. You find something else to make it through.
This is kind of off subject of this question, but I thought about it later. We were talking about a college education. Okay, so when I went to college, we raised hogs, we raised cattle, and we grain farmed. We also raised watermelons. Okay, so while I'm in college, I take pork production classes, I take beef production classes, and within 10 years or 15, we weren't doing either one of those anymore. So they're just that situation that I took those classes, I thought at the time for a reason, and then it's like, well, we don't do that anymore, so that was kind of a waste of time. But you know what I'm saying, it's like everything changes, and so about a third of my college classes, you could, at least in agriculture, you might say, well, that was a waste, but I don't look at it that way because I learned something, you know.
Go ahead and get back there. Oh, you got one, okay. Yep, go ahead.
Due to the like rise in AI and stuff for farming, do you think smaller farms will go on decline and like go more out of business due to the AI coming in?
Well, I don't think that, I see where AI, I think in some occupations, I think it can be devastating, AI, you know, in some occupations. But agriculture, we still have to be out there. We still, somehow or another, that tractor's got to get across the field. And then maybe nobody's going to be in it, but there's still going to be somebody that is going to be telling it what to do. The operators or the owners are still going to be there. It also, we may not have as much help. We may have more help doing something else, or we may, you know, it's kind of like I said, my son was in the tech world. We spent about a week together back mid-February, and I was asking him a lot of these same questions, and he said, well, you know, there's going to be, and he called them something. He said, well, what happens is you can't just let AI do things, because he actually showed me some examples of some AI stuff that he would, you know, present a question and then get the response. He said, there can be some glaring errors with AI. So he said, now you have to you'll create a whole new group of people that now will fact check AI, which I thought that was kind of interesting because I never thought about it. But do you think I mean, we've lost a lot of population in White County now, and a big part of it is because agriculture gets more productive all the time. Bigger equipment, so we don't need all the farms we used to have. We still got the same amount of acres, it's just less people running those acres.
Yeah, I think AI will make agriculture more efficient. Now, in doing so, that means that some agriculture jobs might disappear, but they'll be replaced by AI, robotics, things like that. But yeah, I think it will enhance agriculture.
Yeah, and I think with reference to small farms, look at what the price of technology does. You look at this little creature right here. When iPads first came out, they were what, $1,800 to $2,000, and now you can buy one all day for $400 to $600. The same way with agricultural technology, the fees go down on it. As new technology becomes more commonplace, it becomes more affordable on an acre per acre basis. Now, it may not be adopted as quickly in a smaller operation, say a 400 acre operation, as it is going to be adopted in a 4,000 or 5,000 acre operation, but because they don't have the acres to spread that investment over. But I think as technology historically, as it becomes more and more advanced and more commonplace, the price of it per unit goes down. And so I think you'll find it used on smaller farms as well as larger farms.
And I think earlier when I was talking about VTR and things like that, there will be service industries that will pop up that will, you know, be able to spread that out to the smaller farmers. So I think it'll be available to a smaller farmer as well. provided through some other way.
Well, I actually think I probably spend more money on equipment techs today than I have ever spent in my life, and about half of that is messing around with something electronic, nothing mechanical. They're not overhauling a transmission. They're not doing this or that. A good example, we've got our anhydrous applicator out, took it just messing around the other day, and couldn't get it to turn on, couldn't get it to do anything, way beyond my knowledge. And of course, who do you call? You call a equipment tech who actually, I'll make the comment, and this is a compliment to equipment techs today, is they still have to be able to turn a wrench, and yet they have to be a computer scientist at the same time. So you call one of those guys and they do a bunch of magic, is the way I kind of look at it, and get you going.
That's one of those really important jobs in those 200,000 that Donnie was talking about a while ago.
Okay, we got time for one final question, and this one comes from Addie Lamont. Is Addie here?
She's not here.
She's not here. Well, if you want to take her a gift, you can. What advice would you give to high school students who are interested in a career in agriculture? And also, what advice for students who are not interested in a career in agriculture?
Repeat that.
What advice would you give to students who are interested in a career in agriculture? And what advice would you give to students who are not interested in a career in agriculture?
I'd say the same thing to both. Have a willingness to learn and to continue to learn, well beyond after you get your degree or your diploma.
You may change your mind 6 times before you get there, so yeah, go ahead and get a degree.
I agree with that one on Rusty, because actually I think you guys are in a situation, I think if you look back on comparables of mine that I went to college with and they weren't in ag, they kind of expected to get a job in a certain industry or for a certain company, and they honestly, I think, felt like, well, I'm going to retire from that company. I'm going to work for them my entire career. I think today kids move around, they move companies, they move industry, and industry accepts that much more than they did, I think, in my day. I don't know what, it's just part of what we do. We decide, and they're obviously making those moves because they think it'll make them a happier person, and the companies realize that if my employees aren't happy, nothing's going on good. So yeah, whatever it is, have the motivation to do it and want to do it.
Okay.
I'm going to cheat on this question, Doug. First time when you asked that, just this popped into my head, and yeah, no, this is old school. And I'll preface this: what I consider to be one of the greatest coaches of my generation passed away last week. A gentleman by the name of Lou Holtz. And I had the opportunity to hear him speak many years ago, back before 2000. It was in the late 1990s. And he said something at the end of his speech that has always stuck with me. And I'm going to read it to you so I make sure I get it right. But what he said, and I would say this will be my advice to you, whether you want to go into ag or not, whatever happens to us, good or bad, is because of the choices we make. Whether we go to heaven or whether we go to hell is because of the choices you make. To make good choices, you follow 3 rules. Number 1 is do the right thing. It establishes trust in people. And trust and friendships and family are the 3 most important things you will ever find in your life. Number 2, do everything to the best of your ability. You may not all be rocket scientists. But you've got to do what you enjoy in life, because if you don't have a passion for what you're doing, it's going to be a drudge. And if you have a passion for what you're doing, you'll work very few days in your life, even though you go in every day. And it doesn't matter whether you're the best at everything, but just do what your abilities are, do the best of your ability. And the final thing is show people you care. It doesn't cost you anything, and you never know what kind of positive impact you're going to have on someone's life by a kind word, a smile, a pat on the back. So I'm done.
Okay, let's show our appreciation to our 4 panelists for the time. Our time is concluded, but before we depart, draw your attention to the back side of your notes page, okay? If you would flip it over. This is something that was just announced yesterday. Illinois Farm Bureau is running a contest as part of their Member Advantage campaign, and they're giving away an opportunity for 2 Farm Bureau members to throw out the first pitch at the Cardinals versus Cubs game on July the 30th. And you also get 5 all-inclusive box tickets to the game for you and your friends. So to be eligible for the contest, and this is right up your alley, first you got to be a member of Farm Bureau, which we can help you with. It's only $20 a year for you. But you have to post a video on Facebook or Instagram of why being a Farm Bureau member gives you an advantage. Tag the Illinois Farm Bureau in that post, make it public so other people can see it. And the contest runs from March 22nd to May 10th. The Illinois Farm Bureau Board will judge the submissions at their May monthly meeting. And if you are chosen as one of the 2 winners, like I said, you get to throw out the first pitch at the Cardinals-Cubs baseball game this summer. So, thank you for participating today. I'm going to send an evaluation link to your advisors, and hopefully they share that with you. We appreciate your feedback. We would like to try to make this an annual event, so we know there's areas that we can improve on and make it a little bit better for you. So please give us your honest feedback of everything. And with that, thank you so much for coming today.
Doug, I'd like to say one thing.
Yes.
We've got somebody here that was awarded to be a master farmer last week.
Yes, we
And
did.
that's quite an honor. I mean, he should be recognized for it.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, students, for listening to us all.
Yeah, for our ramblings. And don't go running scared down the street and go, no, I'm not going to go into agriculture. It's a great, great occupation.